The transport ship landed on Vorinth Prime just as the three suns began to set. Alara Vance stepped off the ramp with a single bag over her shoulder and looked at the massive building in front of her. The Galactic Hunter Academy spread across the horizon like a small city. Its towers reached toward the orange sky, and she could hear strange animal sounds coming from somewhere. Deep inside the walls, she was the first human to ever attend this place. A bored-looking official checked her documents and pointed toward a side entrance. Not the main gate where other new students walked through with their families and sponsors. The side door. The one for people nobody expected to succeed. Alara didn't complain. She had learned long ago that complaining changed nothing. Inside, the academy was even bigger than it looked from outside. Hallways stretched in every direction, filled with students from dozens of different species. Some had scales, others had fur, and a few seemed to be made of living crystal or floating gas. They all moved with purpose, talking about their classes, their bonded beasts, their future careers as hunters. Alara followed the signs to the administration office. The director himself was there to meet her, which surprised her until she saw the look on his face. He was not happy to see her. Director Morthfun was a tall creature with gray skin and 4 arms. He held her file in 2 hands while the other 2 rested on his desk. His eyes moved across the pages quickly, and his mouth twisted into something that might have been disgust. "Human," he said, like the word tasted bad. "Your species has been part of galactic society for what? 30 years. And you think you can become a hunter?" "I want to try," Alara said simply. The bond between hunter and beast requires psychic sensitivity, emotional control, and years of training. Humans are known for none of these things. Your species broadcasts emotions like a broken radio. Every beast within 100 meters will feel your fear, your excitement, your confusion. You will drive them mad before you ever form a connection. Alara stayed quiet. She had heard all of this before, during her application process. Nobody had wanted to accept her. The only reason she was here was because of an old law that said any galactic citizen could apply to the academy, regardless of species. Director Morthfun dropped her file on the desk. "You will be assigned to Class 7 Omega. Report to Instructor Velketh tomorrow morning." That night, Alara found her room in the dormitory. It was small but clean, with a window that looked out over the beast enclosures. She could see massive shapes moving in the darkness below. Some of them glowed. Others made sounds that she felt in her chest, more than heard with her ears. She unpacked her few belongings and lay down on the bed. Sleep did not come easily. The next morning, she found Class 7 Omega's training area at the far edge of the academy grounds. It was old and poorly maintained, with rust on the fences and cracks in the concrete. 12 students were already there, sitting or standing in small groups. None of them were talking to each other. They looked up when Alara arrived, and she saw something in their eyes that she recognized immediately. It was the look of people who had stopped hoping. "You're the human," said a creature covered in rough brown scales. His voice was flat. "I'm Shix, Krethvian. Don't bother learning anyone's names. You won't be here long." "Why not?" Alara asked. "Because this is where they send the failures," said another student, a being made of dark blue crystal. "I'm Crix, Silicoid. We've all been here at least 2 years. 0 successful bonds. 0 completed hunts. The academy keeps us around because killing us would look bad in the reports." Alara looked around at her new classmates. There was a creature that seemed to be made of shadows. Another that had too many eyes. One that floated slightly above the ground, leaving a trail of mist behind it. All of them shared the same defeated posture, the same empty expressions. "What happens during training?" she asked. "We go into the enclosures," Shix said. "We try to bond with the beasts. The beasts reject us. Sometimes they attack. Then we come back here and wait for the bell. Every day. Every week. Every month. Instructor Velkith arrived a few minutes later. He was a hunter from the Thorian Dominion, with compound eyes and sharp mandibles. His reputation said he had bonded with 6 different war beasts during his career, a record that few could match. Now he was assigned to teach the unteachable. They looked at Alara with obvious disappointment. New student, human, wonderful. He pointed toward the nearest enclosure. Inside is a juvenile grass runner, herbivore, harmless. Even children can bond with them on most worlds. Try not to make it run away screaming. Alara walked to the enclosure gate. The grass runner was a 6-legged creature about the size of a large dog with soft green fur and large black eyes. It stood in the center of the enclosure, watching her carefully. The other students watched too. They expected her to fail, just like they had failed. Just like everyone in Class 7, Omega always failed. Alara opened the gate and stepped inside. The grass runner tensed. Ready to bolt dot, she stopped walking. For a long moment, she just stood there. Then, slowly, she sat down in the dirt. She didn't move toward the creature. She didn't reach out her hand. She didn't make eye contact. She simply sat and waited and watched the grass moving in the wind. The grass runner tilted its head. Minutes passed. Instructor Velkith made an angry sound. "What are you doing?" Approached the beast. "Begin the bonding protocol." Alara didn't respond. She sat in the dirt with her hands in her lap, and her eyes on the horizon. The grass runner took a step toward her. Then another dot by the time the training bell rang. The creature was standing close enough for Alara to touch. She didn't touch it. She just smiled softly and stood up, brushing the dirt from her clothes. The grass runner made a small sound of confusion as she walked back to the gate. "You didn't complete the bond," Velkith said accusingly. "No," Alara agreed. "Not yet." She could feel her classmates staring at her as she left the enclosure. The grass runner was still standing where she had left it, watching her go. That night, long after the academy had gone to sleep, Alara returned to the beast enclosures alone. She sat outside the grass runner's fence and hummed an old song her grandmother had taught her. A song about patience and waiting and the slow building of trust. Somewhere in the darkness, other beasts stopped their pacing to listen. On Earth, 10,000 years ago, a wolf walked into a human camp. It was hungry. The humans were eating meat around the fire, and the smell had drawn the wolf close. It should have attacked or run away. Those were the only options for a predator meeting another predator. But something strange happened instead. The wolf waited at the edge of the firelight. The humans threw it scraps of food. Night after night, the wolf returned. Its children were born near the camp. Their children grew up knowing the sound of human voices, the smell of human fires. The feeling of human hands on their fur. Wolves became dogs. Wildcats became house cats. Wild horses became partners that carried humans across continents. Humans did not conquer these animals through strength or psychic power. They did something much simpler and much harder. They made friends. Alara did not know the full science behind what made humans different. She only knew what felt natural to her, what her grandmother had taught her on their small farm back on Earth. Animals were not tools to be controlled. They were neighbors to be understood. By her 3rd day at the academy, she had visited every enclosure in the 7 Omega training area. She spent time with each beast, not trying to bond, just being present. She learned their rhythms. She noticed which ones paced when they were anxious and which ones went still. She saw which ones watched her with curiosity and which ones watched with fear. The other students thought she was wasting her time. Shix approached her on the 4th morning, his scales rattling with nervous energy. The Krethvian always smelled like fear. It was a biological feature of his species. When they felt any strong emotion, their bodies released chemicals that other creatures could detect. For most beasts, the smell of Krethvian fear triggered attack responses. "What are you doing?" he asked. "You sit with the beast, but you never try to bond. You never use the protocols. Instructor Velkith says you're the worst student he's ever seen. What do the protocols tell you to do?" Alara asked. "Project Confidence. Establish mental dominance. Show the beast that you are the alpha, the leader, the one in control. And how has that worked for you?" Shix's scales rattled harder. "It hasn't. Every time I try to project confidence, my fear scent gets stronger. The beasts smell my lies, and they attack." Alara nodded slowly. "What if you stopped lying? What? What if you stopped trying to hide your fear? What if you just admitted it?" Shix stared at her like she had suggested he jump into a volcano. "That would make things worse. The beasts would see me as weak. They would never respect the coward." "Maybe," Alara said. "Or maybe they would respect someone honest." That night, Alara took Shix to the enclosure that held the Whisper Stalker. It was a predator that hunted by sensing fear. When it detected a frightened creature, it became invisible and silent, stalking its prey until the perfect moment to strike. The Academy used Whisper Stalkers for assassination missions. They were considered unbondable for any species that felt fear. "This is insane," Shix whispered. His fear scent was so strong that Alara could smell it herself, like burning metal and old sweat. "Sit with me," she said, lowering herself to the ground outside the fence. The Whisper Stalker materialized from nothing, its long body pressed against the barrier. Its eyes were fixed on Shix, tracking the source of the fear scent like a missile tracking heat. "It's going to kill me," Shix said. "It can't reach you through the fence. Just sit. Just breathe." Shix sat. His whole body was shaking. The Whisper Stalker began to pace along the fence, its movements smooth and hungry. "Now," Alara said quietly, "tell it the truth." "What truth?" "Tell it you're afraid." Shix made a sound that might have been a laugh or a sob. "I'm afraid," he said, his voice cracking. "I'm always afraid. I've been afraid every day since I came to this academy. I'm afraid of failing. I'm afraid of being sent home in disgrace. I'm afraid of these beasts, and I'm afraid of dying alone in an enclosure with no one to remember me." The Whisper Stalker stopped pacing. "I know you can smell it," Shix continued, tears running down his scaled face. "I know you can smell everything I feel. I can't hide it. I've tried for years, and I can't hide it. So, here it is. All of it. I'm terrified of you." The beast lowered itself to the ground. Its eyes never left Shix, but something in its posture changed. The hunting tension drained from its muscles. "It's confused," Alara whispered. "Every creature it's ever hunted tried to hide their fear. You're the first one to admit it openly." They sat there for hours. Shix kept talking, kept confessing, kept laying his emotions bare. The Whisper Stalker listened, and slowly, carefully, it crept closer to the fence. Not to attack, just to be near this strange creature that smelled like fear, but acted like something else entirely. By dawn, the Whisper Stalker was pressed against the barrier directly in front of Shix, making a soft sound that neither of them had ever heard before. "What is it doing?" Shix asked. Alara smiled. "I think it's purring." Word spread through Class 7 Omega. The Krethvian, who repelled every beast, had somehow attracted the attention of a Whisper Stalker. The other students wanted to know how. They wanted to know what Alara had taught him. She taught them all. Crix, the silicoid, learned that beasts didn't need soft thoughts. They needed honest ones. Her crystalline mind was sharp and clear, and she found a partner in the geometric worm, a creature that valued precision above all else. The shadow being learned to stop hiding what it was. The floating one learned to be still. One by one, the failures of Class 7 Omega began to change. Not because Alara gave them a new technique. Not because she taught them a better protocol. She simply showed them what humans had learned through thousands of years of living, alongside animals. Trust could not be demanded. It could not be forced. It could not be projected or established or dominated into existence. Trust could only be earned. One honest moment at a time, and the beasts of the Academy, who had been treated as tools and weapons for generations, finally found creatures willing to treat them as something more. By the middle of the week, the Academy could no longer ignore what was happening in Class 7 Omega. Instructor Velkith stood at the edge of the training area, his compound eyes twitching as he watched the impossible unfold before him. Shix walked beside the Whisper Stalker without a fence between them. The creature that had been scheduled for execution last month now followed the Krethian like a loyal shadow, responding to his voice, his gestures, even his moods. Crix moved through the obstacle course with the geometric worm coiled around her crystalline body. The beast had never allowed anyone to touch it before. Now it seemed almost protective of the silicoid student, adjusting its position to help her balance, warning her of dangers with subtle vibrations. The shadow being had bonded with a night crawler. The floating one had connected with something that lived in storms. Even the student who had spent 2 years in complete silence had somehow earned the trust of a creature that communicated only through song. 12 failures. 12 success stories in progress. And at the center of it all, a human girl who sat in the dirt and taught alien species how to be patient. Velkith did not understand. He had trained hunters for 40 years. He knew the protocols, the techniques, the science of beast bonding. What Alara was doing broke every rule he had ever learned, and yet it worked better than anything he had seen in his entire career. He reported his observations to the Rectomorphon. The director did not believe him at first. He came to watch for himself and left without saying a word. The next day, medical officers arrived to scan the Class 7 Omega students for illegal enhancements. They found nothing. Then came the psychic investigators, looking for signs of mind control or manipulation. They found nothing. Finally, the Academy brought in a xenobiologist from the Central Institute, a respected expert on interspecies communication. She observed Alara's methods for 3 days before requesting a private meeting. Her name was Dr. Itherin, and she had 4 legs and a face covered in soft white fur. Her species was known for its intelligence and its curiosity. She sat across from Alara in a small conference room, her large eyes blinking slowly. "I have spent my life studying how different species form connections," Itherin said. "I have documented hundreds of bonding methods across thousands of worlds. What you are doing is not in any of my research." "I'm not doing anything special," Alara said. "I'm just doing what humans have always done." "Explain it to me." "Explain it like I know nothing." Alara thought for a moment. "On Earth, we lived alongside animals for a very long time. We didn't have psychic powers or advanced technology. We couldn't force them to obey us. So we had to find another way. And what way was that? We became their family." Itherin tilted her head. "Family is a biological relationship. How can different species become family?" "Family isn't just about blood," Alara said. "It's about choosing each other. Every day, over and over. It's about showing up when things are hard. It's about being patient when the other person is scared or angry or confused. On Earth, we didn't tame wolves. We invited them to sit by our fires. We shared our food. We protected their young, and they protected ours. After enough generations, they weren't wolves anymore. They were dogs. They were family." Itherin was quiet for a long time. "You are saying that the bond is not about control. Control is the opposite of bonding. Control is what you do to tools. Bonding is what you do with partners. But the Academy teaches control. Every hunter in the galaxy learns to establish dominance over their beasts. And how many of those beasts would stay if they had a choice? Alara asked. How many would fight for their hunters without the psychic bonds forcing them to? Itherine had no answer. That afternoon, Alara led Class 7 Omega on their first official group hunt. It was supposed to be a simple exercise. Track a practice target through the forest, corner it, capture it. Standard training that most classes completed in their first month. Class 7 Omega had never successfully completed a group hunt before. They entered the forest together. Humans and aliens and beasts moving as a single unit. Alara did not give orders. She did not need to. The Whisper Stalker scouted ahead, its fear-sensing abilities finding the target within minutes. The geometric worm mapped the terrain and identified the best approach routes. The Nightcrawler moved through shadows to block escape paths. The beast did not follow commands. They anticipated needs. They communicated with their partners through subtle signals and shared understanding. When the practice target tried to run, it found every direction blocked by creatures working in perfect coordination. The capture took less than an hour. It should have taken all day. Instructor Velkith watched from the edge of the forest, his mandibles clicking in disbelief. He had seen elite hunter squads operate with less efficiency than this group of failures and misfits. After the exercise, he approached Alara directly. How? He demanded. How did you do this? These students were useless a week ago. These beasts were uncontrollable. What did you change? I didn't change anything, Alara said. They were never useless. The beasts were never uncontrollable. Everyone just needed someone to believe they could do it. That's not a technique. That's not a method. That's nothing. Alara smiled. It's everything. The students failed because they were taught that failure was all they could do. The beasts refused to bond because they were treated as objects to be controlled. Once everyone understood that they had value, that they were worthy of trust and respect, everything else followed naturally. Velkith shook his head. This should not work. It breaks every principle of beast management. Maybe the principles were wrong. She walked past him to rejoin her classmates. They were gathered around their bonded beasts, talking and laughing and sharing food. The Whisper Stalker was lying on its back while Shik scratched its belly. The geometric worm had configured itself into a shape that Crix could lean against comfortably. They looked like friends. They looked like family. Velkith watched them for a long time before returning to his office to write his report. He did not know how to describe what he had witnessed. He only knew that everything he thought he understood about the relationship between hunters and beasts was now in question. The human had changed everything. And the week was not yet over. The week ended on the 7th day, but the changes had only begun. Alara sat in Director Morthvaneth's office with the apex curled in her lap. The creature had not left her side since the containment chamber. It seemed terrified of being alone again, and she had no intention of abandoning it. The director looked different than he had a week ago. The arrogance was gone from his posture. His 4 hands lay flat on his desk instead of gesturing with authority. He looked like someone who had watched his entire world collapse and was still trying to understand what had happened. The military council wants to study you, he said. The hunter guilds want to hire you. The Xenobiology Institute wants to map your brain. Everyone wants a piece of whatever you have. I don't have anything special, Alara said. I've told everyone that, and yet here we are. Morthvan gestured at the small creature in her lap. 20 years of the best hunters in the galaxy failed to do what you did in one night. You bonded with a nightmare-class beast using no technology, no psychic projection, no chemical enhancement. Just words and patience, and time, and time, and honesty, and a willingness to be afraid without running away. Morthvin was silent for a moment. I owe you an apology. I assigned you to Class 7 Omega because I wanted you to fail. I thought humans had no place in the hunter tradition. I thought your species was too primitive, too emotional, too weak to master the art of beast bonding. You weren't entirely wrong, Elara said. Humans are emotional. We're not particularly strong or fast or psychically gifted. But we've been forming bonds with other species for longer than most civilizations have existed. It's the one thing we're actually good at. Why? What makes humans different? Elara thought about the question. She had been asked it many times over the past week, and she still wasn't sure she had a complete answer. I think it's because we needed each other, she said finally. On Earth, humans were never the strongest predators. We didn't have claws or venom or armor. The only way we survived was by working with other species. Dogs helped us hunt. Horses carried us across distances we couldn't walk. Cats protected our food from pests. We couldn't dominate them, so we had to befriend them instead. And that friendship became part of your nature. Something like that. We learned to read emotions in other creatures. We learned to communicate without words. We learned that trust takes time and patience, and that you can't force another being to care about you. She scratched the apex behind its ears, and it made a soft sound of contentment. Most species in the galaxy have technology to replace those skills. You can use psychic bonds or chemical controls or genetic programming. But we had to do it the hard way, and that hard way turned out to work better than anything else. Director Morthvin stood and walked to his window. From here, he could see the beast enclosures stretching toward the horizon. Thousands of creatures were down there, bonded to hunters through methods the Academy had used for 300 years. Methods that suddenly seemed crude and cruel. What would you have me do? He asked. I can't undo centuries of tradition overnight. You don't have to. Just start teaching a different way. Let the students spend time with the beasts before trying to bond. Let them fail and try again without punishment. Let them be honest about their fears and weaknesses instead of pretending to be perfect. The guilds won't accept hunters trained that way. They want soldiers, not companions. Then change what the guilds want. Show them that a beast who chooses to fight is worth 10 beasts who are forced to. Elara stood, cradling the apex in her arms. You offered me a position as an instructor. I'm not going to take it. But my classmates will stay. They understand what I taught them, and they can teach others. Let them start a new program. Let them prove that there's a better way. And what will you do? Elara smiled. Go home, I think. My grandmother has a farm. There's a lot of work to do, and I've been away too long. She walked to the door, then stopped. Director. The beasts aren't tools. They're people, in their own way. They have thoughts and feelings and fears and hopes. The moment you start treating them that way, everything else becomes easier. She left before he could respond. Class 7 Omega graduated 3 days later with the highest combined bonding scores in Academy history. They stood on the stage in their formal uniforms, their bonded beasts at their sides. And they called themselves the Pack. It was a human term that Elara had taught them, meaning a family that chose each other. Shix became the head of the new companion training program. His first lecture was titled, The Wisdom of Fear. Why? Honesty matters more than strength. The auditorium was standing. Room only. Crix published a paper on crystalline communication patterns that revolutionized the field of xenobiology. Her co-author was listed as the geometric worm. The shadow being and the floating one became the first non-human ambassadors to Earth, beginning a cultural exchange program that would eventually bring human bonding methods to every corner of the galaxy dot and the apex. The monster that had terrorized the Academy for 20 years lived out its remaining centuries on a small farm on Earth, surrounded by chickens and goats and a very patient old woman who talked to it every day, like it was just another member of the family. Within a decade, the hunter guilds had reformed their training methods completely. Within a generation, the relationship between sentient species and the beasts they partnered with had transformed from domination to cooperation. War beasts who had once been controlled through force now fought willingly alongside their partners, defending them not because they had to, but because they wanted to. Historians would later call it the Companion Revolution. They would write long papers about the socioeconomic factors and the political pressures and the technological developments that made it possible. But everyone who was actually there knew the truth. It started with a human girl who sat in the dirt and refused to be afraid of being afraid. They called humans weak because they formed attachments. They called humans primitive because they couldn't control their emotions. They called humans unsuitable for the hunter tradition because they didn't have the psychic strength to dominate other creatures. They were wrong about all of it. Humans didn't conquer the beast of Earth. They invited them to sit by the fire. They shared their food and their homes and their lives. And after 10,000 years, those beasts weren't servants or tools or weapons. They were family. And that, in the end, was humanity's gift to the stars. The observers began arriving on the 6th day. Ships landed at the Academy's private port carrying representatives from the Hunter Guilds, the Xenobiology Institute, the Galactic Military Council, and a dozen other organizations. News of what was happening in Class 7 Omega had spread faster than Director Morthvin had expected. Now everyone wanted to see the impossible for themselves. The director was not pleased. He had spent 30 years building the Academy's reputation as the finest hunter training facility in the galaxy. His methods were taught on 1,000 worlds. His graduates served in the highest positions of power and prestige. And now a human girl was making all of it look foolish. He called an emergency meeting with his senior staff. "We need to end this spectacle," he said. "Either the humans' methods are legitimate and we must adopt them, or they are a fluke that needs to be exposed. Either way, we cannot allow this uncertainty to continue." Instructor Velkith spoke up. "What do you propose?" "A demonstration. A public test that will prove once and for all whether this human has discovered something real, or whether she has simply been lucky with weak beasts." "What kind of test?" Director Morthvin's 4 hands folded together. "The apex." Silence fell over the room. Every instructor knew what the apex was. A nightmare-class beast held in the Academy's deepest containment facility. It had been captured 20 years ago during a military operation that cost 400 lives. Since then, it had killed or driven mad every handler who tried to bond with it. The apex was not an animal. It was a monster. Its body could shift into any form, and its mind could reach into the deepest fears of any creature nearby and make those fears real. Looking at the apex meant seeing your worst nightmares given flesh and teeth. "That's murder," Velkith said quietly. "It's a test," Morthvin replied. "If her methods work on weak beasts, they should work on any beast. If they don't work on the apex, then we know her success is limited and not worth appending our entire system for. And if she dies, then we express regret and continue as before." The announcement came that afternoon. Representatives from across the galaxy gathered in the observation chamber above the Apex's containment unit. Class 7 Omega was brought in to watch their classmate face the test. Alara stood before the massive reinforced door and listened as Director Morthvin explained what was expected of her. "You have proven capable with simple beasts," he said, his voice carrying to every corner of the chamber. "Now show us that your methods can work where all others have failed. Bond with the apex, and you will change history. Fail, and we will know the limits of human capability. Alara looked at the door. She could hear something moving behind it, something large and wrong. The sound made her stomach twist with fear she couldn't explain. Shix grabbed her arm. "Don't do this. It's a trap. He wants you to fail." "I know," Alara said. "Then, why are you going in there?" She looked at her friend, at the Whisper Stalker standing protectively at his side. "Because something is suffering on the other side of that door. And nobody has ever tried to help it. They've only tried to control it. It will kill you, matey." She gently removed his hand from her arm. But maybe not. The door opened. The Apex's containment chamber was the size of a stadium, with walls made of reinforced metal and floors covered in scorch marks and old stains. Emergency lights cast everything in a dim red glow. And in the center of the space, something moved. Alara's mind went blank with terror. The Apex had taken a form specifically designed to break her. It was fire and darkness, screaming faces and reaching hands. Every nightmare she had ever had made solid and real and hungry. It towered above her, 20 meters of pure horror, and its voice was the voice of everyone who had ever told her she was worthless. "You don't belong here. You're just a human. Weak, soft, pathetic. They sent you to die, and no one will remember you." Alara's legs stopped working. She fell to her knees, unable to look away from the thing before her. Every instinct screamed at her to run, to hide, to do anything except stay in this room with this monster. But she had taught her students that fear was not the enemy. Fear was honest. Fear was real. Running from fear only made it stronger. She forced herself to breathe. The apex shifted, growing larger, more terrible. It was confused. Every creature it had ever faced had either attacked or fled. This small human was doing neither. She was just kneeling in the dirt, shaking with terror but refusing to move. "I see you," Alara whispered, her voice barely audible over her pounding heart. "I'm scared. I know you can feel how scared I am. I'm not going to pretend otherwise." The apex roared, and the sound was like the end of the world. Alara felt blood drip from her ears. But she didn't run. "I'm not here to control you," she continued. "I'm not here to fight you. I'm just here. That's all. I'm just here with you." Hours passed. The observers grew restless. Some left, convinced they were watching a slow suicide. Others stayed, unable to look away from the strange scene below. Alara talked to the apex. She told it about Earth, about her grandmother's farm, about the dog she had grown up with. She talked about loneliness and fear, and the feeling of being trapped in a body that everyone was afraid of. She talked until her voice gave out, and then she just sat in silence, still refusing to leave. The apex shifted again. And again. It tried every form of terror it knew, every nightmare it could imagine. Nothing worked. The humans stayed dot as dawnlight began to filter through the skylights above. Something changed. The apex stopped shifting. Its massive form collapsed in on itself, shrinking, simplifying. The fire went out. The darkness faded. The screaming faces fell silent. What remained was small. The size of a cat, maybe. It had soft gray fur and eyes that were very, very tired. It looked like something that had been fighting for so long that it had forgotten what peace felt like. It walked toward Alara on unsteady legs. The observers leaned forward. Director Morthvin's 4 hands gripped the railing of the observation deck. The apex reached Alara and stopped. For a long moment, they just looked at each other. Then, slowly, it climbed into her lap and closed its eyes. Alara wrapped her arms around it and began to cry above. In the observation chamber, no one spoke. No one moved. They had just watched something that should have been impossible. A human girl had broken through 20 years of rage and fear and madness with nothing but patience and honesty and the simple willingness to stay. Shix was the first to start clapping. Then Crix. Then the rest of Class 7 Omega. The sound spread through the chamber until even some of the observers joined in. Their assumptions shattered beyond repair. Director Morthvin said nothing. He just stared at the girl and the beast in the center of the containment chamber, trying to understand how everything he believed had been so completely wrong.